Attention bobsled riders! You will soon be embarking on a thrilling podcast down the icy slopes of the Matterhorn. So please remain seated, keeping your hands, arms, feet, and legs inside the bobsled at all times. Auf Wiedersehen!
Hello, Yodelers! We are the Matterhorn Yodelers. I am your host today, Peter, with our other host,
Jackie.
And
Japheth.
And today, we're going to talk about our top 5 favorite Yodelers. Go.
First one, Japheth.
No. That's not what we're going to talk about today. Today, we're going to talk about some urban myths of Disney.
Dun, dun, dun.
Because they're out there.
There's a ton of urban
so
myths.
many.
I did like a search for an hour and I sent you guys like, I found 30.
I was like, well, let's narrow that down to 3 and talk about 3 of them. And so we're going to talk ones that we picked out that might interest you or you may have heard in the past, and maybe give you a little bit of background of where that came from and why, or whether or not it is true or it's not true.
That way you can be like, false.
That's
Bears beat Battlestar Galactica.
That's right. So let's start things off with Jackie. What's your myth?
So, I chose this myth because I totally thought this was true.
Oh, really?
I did.
Oh, boy.
You fell for it.
I fell for it, and it's not. So, there is a supposedly gold spike in the middle of the castle.
It's in
It's in the walkway on the bridge. It's on the other side of the bridge, the drawbridge.
It's basically as you've entered into Fantasyland. Like, as you've crossed that threshold when you're no longer underneath the castle.
There's a gold-looking circle, or a spike. It's not gold, it's brass.
It's brass.
Yeah,
It's just been shined.
Yeah, it's just really shiny. And
Shining.
Love that song.
so I'm pretty sure we were on a tour and someone had pointed it out.
I don't know if... I thought they said that it wasn't on the tour.
I thought it said it was.
I don't
But
know.
we'll see. But because I remember a cast member telling me that this gold spike was the center of Disneyland
On opening day.
on opening day. And you could probably read this fact in different tips and different books. You know, this has been an urban myth
It's
for
been around
a long time.
Yes.
And it's easy for it to run away because no one's going to
makes
pull
sense.
out a map and geographically
You're like-
go, this is the center.
Well, I mean, what do people think about? Like, what's the center of Disneyland? They think the castle is the center of Disneyland.
Yeah.
You know, it's easy for people to be convinced that the spike underneath the castle is the center of Disneyland because the castle is the center of the park.
Yeah.
So,
And so this rumor, there's no one knows where this rumor started.
I mean, it's, as Peter said, it's easy to jump to the conclusion.
But, it's probably led from a cast member tired of people asking them,
And so they tell him a lie.
and they tell them a lie, just like maybe Japheth told about Mickey's house
being foreclosed.
Hard times. He had a lot of assets. He had to liquidate.
And so this rumor started, and, there are some cast members that still believe it to this day, but it is not true. On opening day, the middle of the park was closer to where
The Central Plaza.
the Central Plaza, but which is now the fantasy...
the Princess Fair,
The Princess
where you want to go
Fair.
meet your princesses now at Disneyland.
Yeah.
That was classified as the middle.
Geographically, that is the center.
You're going to do a centroid, like the center point of the area of Disneyland. That was it. It was what Jackie described. But it obviously changes as the park grows and expands.
There was a lot of expansions. You had the Indiana Jones expansions. You had the Toontown expansion. Critter Country. And now we have Galaxy's Edge, this new Star Wars land. Like, the center of Disneyland is constantly changing.
So now the center of Disneyland is now Chief Waves a Lot.
No.
Okay.
No.
He's the center of my world.
But then you wonder, why is the shiny dot in the middle of this castle? And the answer is, it was used for surveying.
It's a survey point.
It's a survey point from the castle to Main Street to make sure the castle was straight with Main Street.
With the train station.
Yeah, and the train station.
So that they were center. So if you were to look down the castle, you would see right straight into the train station and not into a building. So it was all about that line of sight.
And so it's survey. So I deal with this in my job where I deal with streets and mapping them out. And one of those things, we use survey points whenever there's a curve in the road or a intersection in a public road. So if you live on a public street and there's a street turning or it meets with another, you may see a survey point. And those survey points are used and tracked so we can map them out. And for legal reasonings, your house is legally tied to those monuments, those survey points. And so Disneyland has one of those that are very famous, as Jackie described, that guests see, and it's tied to the boundaries of the survey system of California. So it's important. So make sure the street is safe and that there's a legal boundary to the property of Disney.
And you must think, well, if one end has a survey point, then the other end must have one. Well, it did. But it is gone now. It got covered or taken
The one on
out
Main Street.
on Main Street in 2018.
Yeah. And that happens, and it could be a private tie survey point, and so at the point they legally don't have to keep the other ones. The ones that are public, they do have to say.
Right.
Sorry, I'm all nerding out with this. I'm like, oh, I do this for a living. This is amazing.
But there's actually several all over the actual park itself. So there's not just the one survey point. They're all over the park.
But this one's just seen by everyone, and it's shiny.
It's very shiny, and that is the reason why it is there. It would be great to have it's awesome they have this cool story that kind of blown out. I would love to meet the original cast member who started that urban myth, but who knows who they are?
Yep, who knows? It's a myth.
It's a myth.
The world may never know.
But now we do. All right, that was good to know. I had actually looked this myth up before, just because I was kind of curious. Because you see that I saw it, and I was kind of curious the truth behind it. And then when someone was explaining, I was like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. That the park's moving, and to plan it all out, that would take a lot of work to get the castle, the center point.
Oh yeah,
survey-wise. But the castle's the center of our heart.
Yes.
And mind.
It gives us the warm fuzzies.
That's where it all originates. That gold spike.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing the little myth about the golden spike. Now let's bring things down into a lot more spookier realm. Japheth, why don't you share us your myth or myths that you would like to share with us today?
So we're at the Haunted Mansion.
What?
Surprise.
You want to talk about
the surprise?
You want to talk about the Haunted Mansion? Are you an expert on the Haunted Mansion?
I am not. I am not going to claim I'm one. I've been fed so many lies about the Haunted Mansion. I don't even know what's true anymore. Yeah, like, I'll just throw this one out here. There's someone who used to give tours out at Disney World, and they would say, like, oh, the Imagineers, they didn't put shoes on the ghosts that dance in the ballroom because they would fly off. And I'm like, they're engineers. Why don't they just like screw the shoes onto the feet. Why you're like, they keep flying off. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to secure these shoes. So like you get fed these lies, and then you're like, wait a second, that doesn't add up. Somebody would have said like, how about we just screw them on? But okay, but we're not talking about shoes and ghosts. We're gonna talk about the hearse in front of Disneyland's Haunted Mansion. And there's this rumor that was told to me, and I was skeptical at first when told to me.
I was skeptical too. I go,
I don't know about this. And this was kind of pre-internet.
Yep.
Where people could throw this out there and people would be like, I don't think so. And the rumor is that the hearse in front of Disneyland's Haunted Mansion is Brigham Young's hearse that carried him to his final resting place.
Yeah.
And for those that don't know, let's just bring up what's a hearse. And so a hearse is a vehicle, whether it's an automobile or a horse carriage, like the one that's in front of the Haunted Mansion, and it carries the body, the casket, to and from places.
Basically, from the church to the graveyard, sort of thing.
It's a show.
Yes.
And then for those who don't know who Brigham Young is, he is an American religious leader. He was a politician, a settler of the American West. So he, I wrote some notes down. He was the second president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints from 1947 until his death in 1877. He is responsible for the founding of Salt Lake City. He served as the first governor of Utah, and he helped direct church settlements throughout the western United States. So he helped with the expansion of settlements throughout western United States with the gold rush, a lot of settlements in California. There's San Diego. I mean, San Diego was there before, but he helped move people to these small settlements to
help them grow,
and also America grow. So he's an American icon in his own way.
He actually has a statue in Washington, D.C., right?
At the Capitol. I've actually seen it. They've got, I think each state gets two, and he is one of them, which I think deservingly so for Utah. He is the founder of pretty much Utah, and the settlers there. So there is a huge population in the Southwest that are familiar with Brigham Young, and it's not a surprise that someone can just throw this out there. You know, and I thought the origin of the myth would just come from like some dad going, "Yeah, I see that. Brigham Young was in that, and he died," and like he'll be like, "Oh, really?" And they eat it up. Like dads make up silly stories that aren't true sometimes because they're bored and you're standing in a queue. But let me go into it. This is not a true myth.
Nope.
It's not. It's false. But there's nothing confirmed. Like there's some people, it's confirmed, but there's no evidence to support it.
Correct.
That's the only thing that can really confirm
there's no way to prove
it. Because you're dealing with a death in 1877. And
I don't think they really kept track of who used what hearse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm coming out. There's no evidence disputing that it is, or no, that it proves that it is. You got word of mouth, and it kind of goes. It starts back with Disneyland acquiring this hearse from a Malibu collector named Dale Rickard, who has nothing to trace the actual wagon. He claims that the Mormons' hearses were always white, and so this has the original white paint. And you're like, boy, that sounds like a good selling point to whatever you're trying to get across. Like, oh yeah, it's white. This is how it is. They use white. Oh really? Nobody else used a white hearse?
Yeah.
No, not at all.
White is a unique color.
Nope, strictly for the Latter-day Saints. No. But he said he bought it for $500 in 1973 from a Las Vegas collector named Dobie Doc. And according to 2 News, who did a research, they actually researched and posted this on their news. And so they have sources, and other people reference them. So I was like, I gotta give them credit. to news. Apparently there was once documentation, according to Dobie Doc, but after his death, the paperwork apparently disappeared. So there's no kind of proof for it. There is a rumor out there that of Brigham Young's family after his death, that there was supposedly someone in Salt Lake area that owned a hearse before Dobie Doc, his last name's Cottle, but he got it, and no one can really verify that either. So it's possible that Youngs had it, but they didn't. But again, Brigham Young had a large family.
Yes.
And so it's hard to track, and no one's really tracking that information to begin with. Also,
not pertinent information in the 1800s.
let me write my journal going, oh, I own a nice white hearse. There's no markings, indications of where its origins are. Like, yeah, there was, so like, we had like little VIN numbers and manufacturers. Yeah. Well, like they did that back then too, especially with a hearse, because it's ornate and it's handcrafted and you want people to know your work. Well, that's not the case. There's no markings on this. So it's just coincidence that, it's theirs, but we have nothing to verify its time period. So if you're an antique seller, wouldn't it be convenient to just come up with a cool story of a American contributor of history to upsell it or to give it worth, as opposed to going, that's a bunch of wood that carried dead bodies at one point too. And it just, it's not a good start to the myth. And so, of course, the investigation leads to, the Latter-day Saint Church, and they noted that it was very specific in Brigham Young's will that his body be carried on a platform on to the Salt Lake Tabernacle, in the sense that he was carried. So he wasn't carried on a platform, but he was carried from one point to the next by hand, by palm bearers. Pallbearers, is that what they are? They're not palm bearers. Are they pallbearers? I think they're pall. It says I copy and paste my notes, and they say pallbearers, and I'm like, has it always been pallbearers? I thought they were palm bearers. Like they're bears or palm bears. Palm trees and bears? Where are we going with this?
This myth took an interesting turn. I wasn't expecting bears.
Bears and trees and the beating Battlestar Galactica. This is amazing. So eventually he was taken to a small cemetery where he's buried from the tabernacle to downtown Salt Lake. So there's no indication that there was even a hearse at his funeral from accounts. And there were reported up to 25,000 people there who had seen him, or they would have mentioned, oh man, this guy had a bomb hearse. It was white and it went down the street. I mean, wouldn't you notice something nice and fancy like that?
There'd be some sort of documentation.
Yeah, nothing. No one's got it in their journals or anything like that. So from the Brigham Young side story, there's nothing to add to it. So news agency, they did more research from, okay, let's look at the hearse itself and see where it could have come from. And the earliest they could have seen it coming is 1890, which is 15 years after his death. And since there's nothing to indicate where the brand or anything, the only thing that can closely tie it in history is that time period. So it's just not there. And Disneyland's stance is, it's just a prop.
Yep.
There's no official sign that connects them, and no manufacturing plates. Even Disney Archives is like, we got nothing to prove it. And I didn't even know this little fact about it was that the hearse, and I thought it'd always been there. It wasn't. It was added in 1995, and originally was supposed to be used in an Indiana Jones themed stunt show, but that didn't happen. And the Imagineer Bob Barnick, did I say that right? Have you heard of that Imagineer?
I don't know that one.
Barnick, no. He proposed, we'll just put it in front of the Haunted Mansion. So they got, you pay $500, you kind of like, well, let's use it.
Sure.
It doesn't look good when you're like...
That's the one thing like Disney's really good at, is like...
reusing props.
Oh, yeah.
Reusing props. Like, for example, you worked at Magic Carpets of Aladdin. You have parade floats in front of your attraction.
Yep.
the
Spitting
spitting camels. So
That's another myth too.
Oh,
We'll get to
yeah.
that
another day.
So yeah, and Disney World has their own hearse, and there's a myth behind that where the voice actor and child actor Bob Driscoll, he supposedly his bones are in there, or his bones were carried. Yeah, the voice actor. Did I tell you he was the voice of Peter Pan?
Not yet.
No. Okay, so he was the voice of Peter Pan. People will be like, "Who's this guy?" He was the voice of Peter Pan in the TV show, and his bones were carried. Unfortunately, he had a tragic ending in his life with bullying and getting into substance abuse, and so his body was never in the vicinity of this and that of the hearse at Magic Kingdom at Disney World. And that one is black. It's different from the one that is at Magic Kingdom, and that one had been used in props in various movies and shows. So I kind of wanted to just throw those out there because those are the myths behind the hearse, and they're all false. There's nothing really to approve it, and
They're just props.
they're props.
Yep.
There's nothing special.
Sometimes
Except for the ghost horse.
The ghost horse. I did like when I'd sit in front of there, I would give him ghost carrots.
Oh,
I'd have
yeah.
Carrie Pale. People were like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm feeding him ghost carrots." "What do you feed your ghost horse with?" And they'd be like, "Oh, that's so good." And I would just shake my head like, "Stupid mortals." Again, how often do you get to call guests stupid to their face?
things you get away with some deadpan.
Murder. So that is what I have to report on my myth. It is false as well.
So we've got another debunked myth about hearses at both Disneyland and Disney World. We're going to go into another myth that a lot of people throw this out.
I love throwing this one
You
out.
love throwing this one out.
I threw it out in an episode.
You did. This myth is about Walt Disney himself, that he's frozen. Walt Disney's frozen, or his
Dang
head,
you, Elsa.
or his head is frozen. Actually, there's a funny story about why Disney made Frozen. It was so that when people would look up Disney Frozen, you would no longer get searches talking about Walt Disney being frozen. I thought that was one of the
We
funniest
need to
things
bring
that-
this back. You see how people bring up like awkward photos of like politicians or Hugh Jackman with his weird face as he's getting out of the water?
Right.
It's like we need to bring that back. We need to tag that.
So we're going to talk about Walt Disney being frozen, or Walt's frozen head.
Sounds like a great name for a podcast.
Oh, sounds like a great name. Just so everyone knows, that was one of the names we threw around.
It was
for-
final two right
It was
there.
final two.
It was our final two. It was we were either going to be the Matterhorn Yodelers, or we're going to be Walt's frozen head.
I would
So
say heads.
heads.
It's like the Lone Rangers.
Oh, okay. So, yeah. So, like, this myth actually plays a part a little bit into our own podcast. So, so just a little bit of information about where this myth comes from. Okay.
Take us back.
Ooh, we're gonna go back. Yeah, we're back.
It's 1967.
That's right. So like we're dealing with the end of Walt's life here, and Walt was in discussion with a gentleman. Well, this is what this gentleman said as to whether or not this conversation took place is still a myth. But this gentleman was the person who started the California Cryogenic Society of California. Okay.
Sounds like a good pseudoscience right there.
Right. So he was in discussion with Walt Disney at the time, who was struggling with his health, with not only his issues with his polo accident, as well he had cancer in the lungs. And so there was a book that came out years earlier called The Prospect of Immortality in 1964 that talked about cryogenics being a possibility for freezing human bodies, and there was no technology to bring someone back, but they said it be able to preserve the body for a future time when technology and medicine could bring someone back.
I just think of Genie telling like Aladdin one of the things he can't do, and he's all like, "I can't bring him back from the dead."
Right.
Don't make me do it. It's not pretty.
Not a pretty picture. I don't like doing it. So, Walt Disney was known for his eye for future technology. So,
Like Tomorrowland.
yes, like Tomorrowland and the space, going into space and all that stuff. Like, he was a man of vision of the future. And so he loved looking at possibles of future technology. So that's where a lot of this speculation comes from, is that this would kind of falls in Walt's wheelhouse of something he would actually look into. Walt died in 1960.
6 or 7?
6.
I think it's 6.
I think it's 6. December 1966. In December, he was cremated 2 days after he had died, and he now lays rest. His ashes are in the Forest Lawn Cemetery of Glendale, California. So there's another origin to this myth as well. So supposedly...
So you're saying this isn't true?
This is not true.
Okay, I just want to get that out
I'm
there.
telling people now, his will was very clear. He wanted to be cremated.
He didn't say how much he was getting cremated.
I guess this is true. He did not. I don't think the will did not specify that how much of his body.
It was like a 90-10 kind of cremation.
Yeah. So supposedly, after his death, a reporter snuck into the hospital dressing up as an orderly. Supposedly saw Walt's body frozen, and so he reported that.
Come on, just let it go.
And that was actually the first instance of this rumor started coming about of Walt being frozen.
It seems like another dad story where he's like, I saw like a big fish story.
Yeah.
Our grandfather would do something like that.
Oh, for sure.
It definitely comes off this way. And the thing is, like, these are rumors that have been around since Walt died then. So, like, these rumors have been around. These are old.
50 to 60 years old
myths. Yeah. And so, like, even in the 70s, Walt's daughter, Diane, she even made a statement. It says,
Oh, no.
Walt's daughter even made a statement. And she's all like, listen, I doubt Walt even knew about this stuff.
But he did.
Supposedly. Because this guy said that he was interested, but they couldn't finalize the paperwork in time.
He was like some guy on the street, and he handed him a pamphlet and put a cigarette out on it. He's like,
well, the thing is, the California Cryogenic Society of California, they didn't actually open up until 1969. So it wasn't until years after.
So it was a basement operation.
Yes, basically that's what it was being. Supposedly, if it was true, that's what it would be. Like, it was... So, like, are there people currently cryogenically frozen? Yes.
We have one in our area.
So, there are... this is real. Like, people are frozen. But it is not true that Walt himself was frozen. But...
all they need is Elsa's kiss. Right? Elsa's kiss.
Oh.
That's the
You gotta kiss Walt. I'm not kissing Walt.
So, yeah, like, Walt's daughter, she came out and even said, like, I doubt he even knew about this. Like, so there are a couple other things that pushed this myth into, like, more speculation because the announcement of Walt's death didn't happen until after he had been laid down to rest. So, like...
So there's a period of time.
There was a period of time before the announcement to the public. And the announcement of the funeral was... When that was announced, the funeral had already taken place because it was specified in Walt's will that he wanted to keep it immediate family. So only immediate family attended his funeral. He had a thing about funerals, about how he didn't like depressing people. He wanted people to remember him as he was, not as a person who died.
So he didn't want like the linen at like Red Square where he's like in a glass coffin.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. He did not want that at all. He was
the whole show.
He was a
and
person
media
of
involved.
image. Like image was important to Walt. And so like
He had a good brand and like how he looked and how he presented himself.
absolutely. So like yeah, so like this rumor continued to spawn more and more.
I like the one where he's under Pirates of the Caribbean.
That's what it turned
Yes.
into. That
It's around the same time the construction was going.
correct. That his frozen head is located underneath in the caverns of the Pirates of the Caribbean attraction at Disneyland.
I've heard of Disney World, but I've worked with people at Disney World. No frozen head there.
For the things that I've seen, the rumors have been consistently Disneyland,
Okay.
not Disney World. So there were a couple books published that also would state this as fact.
Boy.
But
that's brazen.
But these books were riddled with fallacies and without any evidence. And
Libel.
so, yeah, there was a lot of that, and so that still continued that myth in popularity. And then obviously with the internet, you can make anything popular.
If you say it enough, it can be conceived as
Everything
true.
on Wikipedia is true, right?
I actually got some of my information right here. I'm not gonna lie. It's always a good starting point.
It's even gotten to the point where it's become like this common phraseology. People say like, "Oh, Walt's frozen body is
rolling around,
or Walt's rotating bodies with circulating the Innoventions building at him constantly rolling over in his grave because of how horrible Tomorrowland is."
Oh yes,
which
I perpetuated some of this.
So go and listen to our Tomorrowland updates episode. That was a good episode we did.
And then also listen to cast members. What was it? What do we agree the name was?
I don't even remember what I named it.
It was like behaving badly
Something
or
like
how to
that.
get fired as a cast member. I think that's what it was. But we need to write down our names.
I know. I need to remember them. But yeah. So these myths have, this myth, the Haunted Mansion myth, and the myth about the spike. There are hundreds of Disney myths out there. And, I keep thinking about, like, especially with the Walt one, like, why would this myth gain so much momentum and so much, like, people trying to believe in it? And I think it's because there's a special magic that, especially with Walt Disney, that, like, people didn't want to let him go. He was a beacon of inspiration for many people. He brought hope to a world that was pretty chaotic at the time. There was a lot of chaos and scariness that was going on, and he was able to, take people out of that world and to, picture a better future.
You could say he was an American dream.
Absolutely, an American dream.
Oh, some bitterness on that.
We might share that story another day. So, and I'm not here to say that, like, oh, I hate all these people that start these myths. Because you know what? All these myths come from a place of love. For the most part. Most of them do.
Even the dead bodies?
Even the dead bodies. These myths come from a place where, people want to bring magic into something that may not have magic at all, like a hearse in front of the Haunted Mansion, or the center spike in front of at the castle at Disneyland.
Because that's what they've done, like, throughout the park. They've put magic secrets throughout, and why not have magic in this object I'm looking at?
Correct.
Obviously, somebody thought of something, and so it's got to have some sort of importance.
So, a lot of these myths, they're not true, and that's that. But sometimes it's fun to, like, hold on to those little things, like, oh, this is that, and this is this. To throw your own little spin on it. I think that's all part of the magic that Disney has brought into our lives, the ability to to maybe see magic in places that don't have magic.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, definitely. As much as Walt's Frozen head is not true, it's always fun to think it is.
Yeah, I know it's not true. Like, I'm not a believer into that conspiracy theory, but I still reference it and use it. Like, I still say it like it's true, even though I know it's not. We
should ask Ted Williams about that. He's right next to him.
So that's going to do it for our discussion today for some urban myths. We'll probably come back and do some more because, as I said, there's a lot.
There's a list, and there's some good ones. I was like, oh, I've written. And I was like, wait, rein it in.
Yeah,
there's some good ones out there.
Some good ones. We want to spread the love out a little bit. We don't want to cram it all into one episode. So thank you for joining us this week for the Matterhorn Yodelers. You can join us on Facebook and Instagram. Tell us some of the urban myths you maybe heard.
Ooh, yes, we can investigate them.
Yeah,
Yes.
We can look into it for you. If you don't want to
Google it
yourself.
Google it
yourself.
Google it yourself.
We'll Google it for you. And let us know. You can email us at the matterhornyodelers@gmail.com. Just let us know. And until next time, auf Wiedersehen.
Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of the Matterhorn Yodelers. Please remember, before your bobsled comes to a complete stop, to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And remember...
Remain seated, please. Permanecer sentados,